The galaxy was a vast place, filled with strange and powerful civilizations. Among them was the Intergalactic Alliance, a collection of species that had united for peace. But when humans first made contact with them, everything changed. To the Alliance, humans were nothing more than a primitive, weak species. Their technology was basic and their ways of life were primitive. Yet there was something about them that intrigued the powerful beings of the galaxy. Still, their survival rate in the larger cosmic scale was low. The Alliance believed that they could deal with these humans easily. The decision was made. Humans would be exiled to a planet far away from the peace of the galaxy, where they would live or die. This planet, known as the Deathworld, was the most dangerous world ever discovered. It was a place of deadly creatures, poisonous plants, and violent weather. No species could survive there for long, or so the Alliance believed. The humans would perish in time, and their disappearance would be the end of the matter. When the humans were exiled, they were left with nothing but their wits and will to survive. Their ships, barely functional and poorly built compared to the advanced technology of the Alliance, were broken down and left on the hostile planet. The Alliance watched with interest. They thought they were putting the humans out of the way for good. As the humans arrived on the Deathworld, they were met with nothing but destruction. Their ships crashed to the surface, torn apart by the unforgiving atmosphere. Many died in the crash, their bodies scattered across the wilderness. But those that survived were determined to fight for their lives. They had no choice. The survivors were not experts in survival, but they were determined. They had no high-tech tools, no fancy weapons, just their minds and hands. The first night they spent on the Deathworld was the worst. They had no shelter, no food, and no water. As darkness fell, they huddled together, shivering, praying they would survive the night. But as the hours passed, something incredible happened. The humans began to adapt. They used what little they had to make crude shelters out of the resources around them. They built fires from sticks and rocks, using old knowledge passed down from their ancestors. They didn't know the planet, but they learned fast. They found water, they found food, and they survived. The next morning, the survivors woke up with a new sense of determination. They had made it through their first night. Many of them still had doubts, but others began to see something strange. Humans were built for survival. They were able to think on their feet, to use their brains and their hands in ways other species couldn't. And with each passing day, the humans began to change the rules of survival on the Deathworld. But they weren't alone. The planet was full of dangerous creatures, deadly plants, and hostile environments. The humans were constantly under attack. But instead of retreating, they fought back. The first victory came when they took down a massive creature that had been terrorizing their camp. It was a dangerous, monstrous beast that seemed unstoppable, but the humans used their wits to outsmart it, trapping it and killing it for food and resources. This first victory was a turning point. The humans weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving. They didn't have the strength or the advanced weapons the aliens had, but they had something far more valuable: their minds. They used every tool at their disposal and adapted faster than anyone could have imagined. They knew how to fight smart, and that was enough. And then something even stranger began to happen. Over time, the humans started to grow stronger. The Deathworld had been a place of death and danger, but for the humans, it was turning into a forge, a place where they were being shaped into something new. They began to understand the world around them. They studied the creatures, learned the land, and made it their home. And the longer the humans survived on the Deathworld, the more powerful they became. They were becoming a force to be reckoned with. The Alliance had thought they had won. They thought the humans would perish, but the humans had turned the tables. And now, the galaxy would soon realize what the exiled species was truly capable of. But the Alliance had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that the humans, exiled to a Deathworld, were about to become the greatest superpower the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had not only survived, they had evolved. The question now was, what would happen next? The unlikely strength. The first few weeks on the Deathworld were chaotic. The humans, now scattered across the wild, had to find ways to band together. No longer was there time for the luxury of hope. The Deathworld, a planet so dangerous it had become the stuff of nightmares, showed no mercy. Every step outside their makeshift shelters could be their last. Dangerous predators lurked in the shadows, and the environment itself seemed to conspire against them. Yet, the survivors didn't give up. They learned quickly that they needed to rely on each other. The deaths of so many in the early days had shaken them, but they also fueled a spark of determination. In small groups, they began to work together, pooling their knowledge and skills. The natural resources of the planet were hostile, yet within them lay a potential humanity hadn't yet fully realized. John, a former soldier, became an unlikely leader. He had never planned to become a leader, but in the face of danger, he had risen. His experience in combat had prepared him to think fast, and it was that very trait that began to unite the survivors. John's group found shelter in a cave system that, while treacherous, provided much-needed protection from the planet's vicious storms. There, they started to build a small, organized society. John didn't just lead by strength. He led by understanding and collaboration. He recognized the value of each person in his group. There were engineers, doctors, and farmers among the survivors, all with skills that would prove to be invaluable. John encouraged them to contribute whatever they could. Together, they began creating weapons and tools from the limited materials the planet provided. Meanwhile, tensions were rising among the other groups of humans scattered across the Deathworld. The survivors were now divided into factions, each one struggling to secure food, water, and territory. Some believed they should remain hidden, hiding in the shadows, waiting for rescue. Others, like John's group, believed the only way to survive, and ultimately escape, was to fight back and take control of their surroundings. In another part of the world, Lisa, a brilliant engineer, had come up with a plan that could change everything. She had realized something about the planet that the other groups hadn't. It wasn't entirely uninhabitable. The Deathworld was rich in resources, valuable minerals, rare metals, and hidden water sources. If the humans could harness these resources, they could not only survive, they could thrive. But there was a catch. The resources weren't just sitting there, waiting to be mined. They were guarded. The planet was filled with dangerous creatures, like massive reptilian beasts and gigantic insect colonies that fiercely protected their territory. Lisa, however, was convinced that they could find a way to harness the resources without falling prey to the planet's predators. John's group, working alongside Lisa's ingenuity, began to explore the possibilities. They learned how to extract the planet's resources by using its own dangers to their advantage. They built traps, created weapons, and began fortifying their settlements. Slowly, the planet that was meant to destroy them was becoming the perfect place for them to forge new weapons and tools. One day, after weeks of planning and testing, the humans discovered something incredible: a natural underground spring. It was hidden deep beneath the surface, but it provided an endless supply of clean water. The discovery was a game changer. Now, with water secured, the humans could focus on expanding their reach and fortifying their settlements. At the same time, the predators on the planet grew more hostile. The creatures seemed to sense that the humans were becoming a real threat. It wasn't long before John's group was forced to defend their home against a terrifying wave of attacks. The beasts were unlike anything the humans had seen before. They were fast, strong, and relentless. However, John and his group weren't just survivors anymore. They had learned how to fight back. They had learned how to fight smart. Instead of running from the attacks, they used their knowledge of the terrain to trap the beasts, neutralizing the danger one by one. It was a brutal fight, but for the first time since their exile, the humans started to see their power. The humans were evolving, not just in strength, but in their ability to understand the planet. The more they learned, the more they adapted. They began to use the planet's dangers to their advantage. The natural weapons they'd once feared were now tools that worked for them. The humans were not just surviving anymore. They were becoming something else entirely. They were learning, adapting, and growing stronger each day. The planet that had been meant to break them was now making them stronger than ever. And the Deathworld was about to learn that it had underestimated humanity. The question remained, how long before the humans would be strong enough to leave this planet behind? And what would happen if they chose to stay and conquer it? As John looked out over the camp, the wind howling through the trees, he couldn't help but smile. They had come so far, but the journey had only just begun. The unseen power. With each passing day, humanity's transformation on the Deathworld grew more apparent. What was once a broken, scattered group of exiles was now a force to be reckoned with. But as their strength grew, so did the awareness of their presence. The Deathworld, though vast, had its share of inhabitants, and some of them weren't just creatures of instinct. There were others, beasts that had developed intelligence beyond the common understanding of the planet's savage ecosystem. They were organized, ruthless, and they had noticed the humans. John's group had been preparing for the worst. The last attack had been repelled, but the scars left on their camp were a painful reminder that they were far from safe. Word of their survival had spread, not just among the local predators, but to something far worse, a predatory species that had long since learned how to bend the harsh environment of the Deathworld to their will. These creatures were no longer just hunting for food. They were hunting for power. And the humans were a threat to their rule. The humans, however, were not ready to back down. They had found ways to fight back, to use their environment to their advantage. Their tactics, crude at first, were now being refined. With each battle, they grew smarter, more coordinated. They had learned from their losses and used every setback to fuel their drive to survive. But now, a greater test was looming. They had caught the attention of the ruling predators, creatures of immense size and intelligence who ruled this land with an iron grip. These creatures were unlike anything the humans had ever encountered before. They could think, reason, and strategize. They were predators in the truest sense of the word. The question was no longer about whether or not the humans could survive. It was about whether they could outsmart these powerful adversaries. One such creature, a towering figure that had become known as the Alpha, led the new wave of attackers. The Alpha was the leader of an ancient species that had once ruled the Deathworld. For centuries, they had been the undisputed rulers of the planet's ecosystem. But when the humans arrived, something had changed. They had begun to challenge the Alpha's authority. It wasn't just the physical power of the humans that made them a threat. It was their adaptability and their tenacity. The Alpha had heard stories of how the humans had turned the environment itself against its predators. They were beginning to realize that the humans were not just survivors. They were an existential threat. John, the reluctant leader of the humans, now found himself in a race against time. The Alpha was not just a creature of brute strength. It was a strategist, and it had begun to organize the planet's other predators into a deadly coalition. The creatures that once acted as solitary hunters were now coming together, learning to work as one. John knew that the humans would have to be faster, smarter, and more resourceful if they were to defeat this new threat. As the days passed, the tension grew. The humans were preparing for something far bigger than any battle they had faced before. They couldn't rely on their strength alone. They had to think differently. John knew that they had a secret weapon, something the predators hadn't considered. The humans had intelligence, and they had technology. While their tools were primitive compared to what they had once had, they were still formidable. They had developed new weapons, new strategies, and they had something else, a fire inside them that couldn't be extinguished. Lisa, the engineer who had helped design their makeshift weapons, was key to their survival. She had a plan, a bold, dangerous plan that involved setting traps so cunning they would confound even the most intelligent of predators. The Deathworld was harsh, but it was also full of resources. The humans had learned how to turn its dangers into advantages. Now they would need to turn the Predator's own strength against them. As night fell on the camp, John gathered his people. The skies were dark, and the wind howled across the barren plains. They would need to be ready for anything. The Alpha and its coalition were not far behind, and the humans knew that the time for hiding was over. "We've survived this long by sticking together," John said, his voice steady but full of purpose. "Now we fight smarter. We fight with everything we've got. The Alpha might think it's the Predator, but we are the true hunters. We're going to show them that they've underestimated us." His words struck a chord with everyone. For the first time since their exile, the humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for dominance. They were going to take control of their own fate. The humans didn't know it yet, but this battle would mark a turning point. They were no longer just survivors. They were becoming a new force, one that could challenge the very planet that had once been their prison. The Deathworld was about to meet the unstoppable force of humanity's will to survive. As the night deepened, John and his team set their final plans in motion. They would fight back with everything they had, and they would make sure that the Alpha knew it had awakened a sleeping giant. The clash of titans. The following day dawned with a heavy silence. The usual noises of the Deathworld, the sounds of the harsh winds, and the creatures in the distance were drowned out by the tension that gripped the humans. The Alpha and its coalition of predators were closing in, and there was no turning back now. John and his team had prepared as best they could, but they knew that this battle would test everything they had learned. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight to prove their place on the Deathworld. In the heart of their camp, John paced nervously. He could feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. If they lost this fight, everything they had built would be destroyed. The predators weren't just animals. They were organized, ruthless, and led by the terrifying Alpha. If the humans couldn't win here, they wouldn't get another chance. But John refused to let fear cloud his mind. They had survived this long by sticking together, and he was not about to let that slip away. "We need to be ready," John said, his voice firm, as he addressed his team. "The Alpha is no fool. It knows we're planning something. Expect an ambush. But remember, we're fighting on our terms now." Lisa, the brilliant engineer, was at the center of the preparations. She had designed traps, built weapons, and crafted defenses that the humans would use in their most dangerous fight yet. "The Alpha and its coalition will underestimate us," she said, her eyes steely with determination. "We've been using the land to our advantage, and now we turn that to full force." In the hours leading up to the battle, John's team scattered throughout the camp, setting traps, reinforcing their position, and preparing for the worst. They worked together in silence, each person focused on their task, knowing that they could not afford mistakes. Every step they took, every decision they made, would determine their future. The Predator coalition would not show mercy, and the humans would have to fight with everything they had, or they would fall. Meanwhile, the Alpha and its coalition of predators were closing in. They moved with purpose, a massive force of terrifying creatures, each larger and more deadly than the last. The Deathworld was their domain, and they ruled it with unchallenged power. But the humans had made an enemy of the most dangerous predator on the planet, and the Alpha would not let them escape without making a show of dominance. The Alpha's coalition advanced toward the human camp, their footfalls shaking the ground beneath them. There were giant, armored creatures with thick, scaly hides that could withstand most weapons. There were smaller, quicker predators that specialized in ambush tactics. The coalition was a well-coordinated group, each member knowing its role in the attack. And at the forefront was the Alpha, a towering creature of immense strength and intelligence. It was not just a force of nature. It was a calculating, strategic mind that had orchestrated the rise of its coalition. But the humans were ready. As the predators neared the camp, John and his team set their traps into motion. The ground beneath the Alpha's coalition cracked open as hidden explosives detonated, sending shockwaves through their ranks. The first wave of predators fell, caught off guard by the strength of the humans' attack. The Alpha roared in fury, its voice echoing across the battlefield, but it did not falter. It quickly signaled its coalition to regroup, but it was too late. The humans were already on the move. Lisa and the other engineers had created an array of weapons using the Deathworld's resources: sharp, jagged rocks, makeshift cannons, and fire-based traps. The humans fired their weapons with deadly accuracy, each shot finding its target. The predators, though powerful, were not prepared for the humans' cunning and resourcefulness. They had relied on their brute strength and speed for so long that they were slow to adapt to the humans' tactics. The battle was chaotic, a mixture of brutal physical combat and strategic maneuvers. The humans fought with a ferocity that matched the predators' strength, but they had something the predators did not: intelligence. The humans used the environment to their advantage, leading the predators into narrow canyons where they could be picked off one by one. They ambushed the Alpha's forces, attacking from unexpected angles, forcing the predators into a defensive position. Despite their preparation, the humans were not invincible. The Alpha's coalition was vast and powerful, and the battle began to take its toll on the humans. John's team fought fiercely, but they could feel their energy waning. It was only a matter of time before they would be overwhelmed. The predators had numbers on their side, and the humans were running low on supplies. Just as the humans began to falter, a new sound echoed across the battlefield. It was a roar, but not from the Alpha. It was from a creature that had once been considered an ally to the predators, a massive, ancient beast that had once ruled the Deathworld before the Alpha had risen to power. This beast had watched from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. It had come to the aid of the humans, recognizing that the true threat to its survival was not the humans, but the Alpha. With the help of the ancient beast, the humans turned the tide. The predators, now divided, were no match for the humans' united front. The Alpha, realizing that it had underestimated the humans, began to retreat, but not before it was struck down by the very creatures it had once ruled. The battle ended with the humans victorious, but at a great cost. Many had fallen, and their camp was in ruins. Yet in that moment of victory, John and his team knew they had proven something greater than survival. They had proven that humanity was not just a race of survivors. They were a force capable of changing the course of the Deathworld. They had faced the ultimate predators, outwitted them, and emerged as the new rulers of the planet. But the fight wasn't over. The Deathworld had many more secrets and many more challenges to face. But for the first time, the humans knew they were not alone. They had proven that they could survive, adapt, and conquer anything that came their way. The Deathworld had underestimated them, and now the predators would have to learn that humans were not to be trifled with. The price of victory. The battle had been won, but the cost was undeniable. The humans, despite their victory, were not untouched by the devastation that had followed. John and his team stood among the remnants of the battlefield, surveying the damage. The smoke still lingered in the air, and the bodies of fallen comrades and defeated predators were scattered across the ground. The ground was torn up, and the makeshift defenses that had once been a testament to their ingenuity were now little more than rubble. John's heart weighed heavy as he scanned the scene. Victory had come at a great cost. Several of his team members had been injured, and some, like his close friend, Mark, hadn't made it through the battle. The pain of loss was always the hardest to bear, but the silence of his team was even worse. They had won, yes, but the bloodshed and sacrifice would never leave them. "John, we did it," Lisa said, her voice faint as she approached. Her face was streaked with dirt, and her eyes were tired, but there was a look of pride in them. The humans had proved themselves. "We've defeated the Alpha and its coalition. We're not just survivors anymore. We're the rulers of this world." John turned to her, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, we did it, but at what cost? We've lost good people, Lisa, good friends. Are we really ready for this? Can we take on the mantle of being the rulers of this Deathworld?" Lisa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked down at the ground, her mind working through the weight of his words. The victory was hard-earned, but it felt hollow when you saw the lives that had been lost in the process. She knew John was right. It was easy to claim victory, to declare dominance over a planet, but the true price of power was steep. "We have to keep moving forward," she said finally. "We can't afford to fall apart now. Our people are depending on us. The Deathworld may be ours, but there are still challenges ahead. We've only just begun." John nodded, his thoughts heavy with the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. He could see the determination in Lisa's eyes, and he knew she was right. The battle was over, but the war for control of the Deathworld had just begun. The Alpha's coalition was only the beginning. There were other predators on the planet, other factions that had yet to take notice of the humans' rise to power. The Deathworld was a wild, untamed place, and it would not be kind to those who were unprepared. "We'll rebuild," John said, his voice steady. "We'll honor the people we've lost by making sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. This is our home now. We'll make it safe, not just for us, but for everyone who joins us." With that, John and his team began to move through the remnants of the battlefield, gathering the wounded and tending to the dead. They worked together, quietly, with purpose, as the sun began to set. The world around them was still dangerous, but for the first time, they could see a future ahead. They had survived the worst the Deathworld had to offer. Now, they would make it their own. As the night fell, the humans began to regroup. They set up makeshift shelters, tending to their wounds and sharing stories of the battle they had fought. It wasn't the grand celebration they might have imagined, but it was a moment of peace, a fleeting moment where they could catch their breath. But John couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Alpha may have fallen, but there were others waiting. Other creatures that would test their strength, their resolve, and their ability to survive. The Deathworld would never stop throwing challenges their way. Yet, John felt something else deep inside him. A sense of purpose. They had survived. They had beaten the odds, and they were ready for whatever came next. As the stars filled the sky above them, John gathered his team together. They stood around a small fire, their faces lit by the soft glow of the flames. They didn't speak much, but the bond between them was stronger than ever. They had fought side by side, lost together, and emerged victorious. And no matter what came next, they would face it together. "Tomorrow, we begin the next chapter," John said, his voice low but full of determination. "We rebuild, we grow stronger, and we make sure that we never fall back into the darkness again. We're not just survivors anymore. We're the future of this world." The team nodded in unison, their resolve hardening. They had lost much, but they had gained something far more valuable. The knowledge that they could overcome any obstacle, that they could fight for what was theirs, and that together, they were unstoppable. The Deathworld had thrown its worst at them, and they had emerged stronger. Whatever the future held, they would face it with unyielding strength. The human survivors had become something far greater than anyone could have imagined. They were no longer exiles. They were the rulers of the Deathworld, and they would never go down without a fight. The growing threat. The days that followed their hard-fought victory were filled with the sounds of rebuilding. The survivors worked tirelessly, repairing their shelters and reinforcing their defenses. But even as they recovered, there was an unsettling feeling in the air. John couldn't shake the constant sense of being watched. It was as though the Deathworld itself was waiting, patiently, to see if the humans truly had what it took to claim it as their own. Despite their success, John and his team knew that the battle was far from over. The Alpha may have been defeated, but other predators lingered, watching from the shadows, biding their time. And there was something else, something even more dangerous than the hostile creatures that roamed the land. The Deathworld was not just a place of survival. It was a place where strength was the only law. If the humans were to hold their ground, they would need to become more than just survivors. In the distance, there was a rumble of thunder. The sky darkened as dark clouds rolled in, a reminder of the planet's violent nature. John stood at the edge of their camp, his eyes scanning the horizon. Something was out there. Something new, something they hadn't seen before. The Alpha's defeat was just the beginning, but they had to be prepared for what was to come. "We can't afford to relax," John muttered to himself. "We need to keep moving, keep growing stronger. The Deathworld won't give us mercy, and neither will the predators lurking in the shadows." Lisa walked up beside him, her expression grim. "I know, but we can't do it alone. We need to form alliances, get more people on our side. We can't let the Deathworld tear us apart before we've had a chance to really build something." John turned to her, eyes narrowing. "You're right, but I don't trust anyone out here. These creatures, they fight to the death for dominance. They'll see us as a threat, even if we offer peace." Lisa nodded, understanding his concern. The Deathworld was not a place for weak alliances. It was a place where power ruled above all. If the humans were going to survive, they needed to show strength, not just among their own people, but to the entire planet. That night, John couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of the future. He knew that the humans couldn't simply fight their way through every challenge that came their way. There had to be a better way, a way to secure their place on the Deathworld without constantly being forced into battle. As the night wore on, John stood up, making his way to the command tent. There, his team was gathered, deep in discussion. Maps were spread out on the table, showing their current position on the planet, the surrounding territories, and the locations of potential threats. "Any new reports?" John asked, his voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of urgency. Lisa looked up from the map. "We've got something. There's a large group of creatures gathering near the northern plains. They're not like anything we've seen before. Bigger, faster, and more aggressive." John's heart sank. "What are they?" "We don't know yet, but we're not taking any chances. I recommend we send out a scout team to gather more intel before making any moves." John considered this for a moment. "Prepare the team. We need answers, and we need them fast. I don't like surprises on this planet. We've got to be ready for whatever's out there." As the team scrambled to make preparations, John couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse than the Alpha's coalition was coming. The Deathworld had a way of hiding its most dangerous predators, keeping them in the shadows until it was too late. As the scout team left the camp, John watched them disappear into the dense, dark jungle, their forms swallowed by the trees. He hoped they would return with valuable information, but part of him feared that they would not. The Deathworld was a brutal place, and even the most experienced of hunters could be lost within its wild heart. Hours passed before the scout team returned, looking weary and shaken. Their report was short but chilling. "A new species. They don't look like anything we've encountered. They're intelligent, too intelligent, and they've got technology. Weapons like nothing we've ever seen before." John's blood ran cold. Technology. The humans had survived the Deathworld through sheer willpower and ingenuity. But if the new creatures had technology far superior to theirs, it would change everything. "Get the team ready," John ordered, his voice firm. "We're not waiting for them to make the first move. This is our world now, and no one takes it from us." The scouts' warning was clear. This new species was not just another predator. They were a threat, and they had the power to topple everything the humans had worked so hard to build. The next few days were a blur of activity. The humans prepared for war, strengthening their defenses and readying their weapons. But the uncertainty loomed over them like a dark cloud. No matter how prepared they were, no one knew what kind of enemy they were truly facing. Would this new species be their undoing, or would they rise to meet the challenge, proving once again that humanity was capable of surviving against impossible odds? John had no answers, but he knew one thing. The Deathworld had thrown everything it could at them, and they had survived. But now, they were facing something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. and they would need all of their strength, unity, and resilience to hold their ground. The battle was coming, and this time it would be unlike anything they had ever faced, the ultimate battle. The air was thick with tension. Days had turned into a blur of preparation, strategy, and mounting anxiety. John and his team had fought their way through impossible odds, surviving the harshest of environments and defeating the deadliest of predators. But nothing could prepare them for what was coming. The new species, with their advanced technology and cunning intelligence, was a threat like no other. John stood at the edge of the encampment, watching the first rays of sunlight break through the dense, dark clouds above. His mind raced, thoughts of the upcoming battle swirling in his head. They had no idea what they were up against, but they couldn't back down. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment that would define their future on this deadly planet. "John, we're ready," Lisa's voice broke through his thoughts. She had joined him on the perimeter, her eyes scanning the horizon. John nodded, turning to her. "This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about taking this world as our own. We fight for the future, for humanity's place in this galaxy." Lisa's gaze softened, but there was no hesitation in her eyes. "We fight for each other, and we fight to show the Deathworld that we're not going anywhere." The sun was now fully up, casting its pale light across the battlefield. The scouts had reported that the new species was already closing in, their movement swift and silent, like shadows creeping through the trees. Their technology was unlike anything the humans had seen, with weapons capable of devastating entire armies. But the humans had one thing the alien species didn't: unity. They had been tested, pushed to their limits, and yet they had endured. "This is it," John muttered, taking his position alongside the rest of his team. They had spent days preparing for this moment, fortifying their camp, setting up traps, and training their soldiers to work in unison. They may not have had the same weapons or technology as their foes, but they had something far more valuable: determination. As the enemy drew closer, John's heart pounded in his chest. The quiet of the forest was eerie, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a creature. But it wasn't long before they saw the first signs of movement. The trees parted and figures emerged. Alien soldiers, clad in advanced armor, moving with the precision of a trained military unit. John clenched his fists. This was the enemy, and they were not going to make it easy. "Prepare to engage," John ordered, his voice cold and firm. "Stay sharp. We have one chance at this." The humans had the element of surprise on their side, and they weren't about to let it slip away. As the enemy advanced, the humans launched their first strike. A series of carefully placed explosive traps detonated, sending a shockwave through the area. The alien soldiers were momentarily disoriented, but they quickly recovered, raising their weapons and preparing to retaliate. But the humans were already on the move. John and his team, well versed in the art of guerrilla warfare, used the terrain to their advantage. They darted from cover to cover, striking fast and hard, using their limited resources to maximum effect. Their weapons were crude compared to the advanced technology of the aliens, but they were deadly in the hands of the experienced soldiers who wielded them. The battle raged on, the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and cries echoing through the forest. The humans were outnumbered, and the aliens' technology gave them an edge, but the humans' resolve was unshakable. They fought with everything they had, using their wits, their instincts, and their unity to hold their ground. John moved swiftly through the battlefield, taking down enemy soldiers with precision. He had seen death before, but today it felt different. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their right to exist on this planet, for their right to claim it as their own. Lisa was beside him, her face determined. "They're not giving up," she shouted over the chaos. "Neither should we." The enemy's advanced weaponry tore through the humans' defenses, but the soldiers held strong. They fought with everything they had, unwilling to let their enemies break their spirit. John's heart raced as the battle intensified. The Deathworld had tested them, but now, They were fighting for something far greater, their place in the universe. But just as it seemed the tide was turning against them, John saw something that made his blood run cold. A massive figure emerged from the trees, a towering alien, more powerful than any they had encountered before. This was the leader of the new species, and it was clear that he wasn't there for diplomacy. "Everyone, fall back," John yelled, but it was too late. The alien leader raised his weapon, unleashing a devastating energy blast that sent several of the humans flying through the air. For a moment, the humans faltered. The alien leader was a force to be reckoned with, and the humans were struggling to keep up. But in that moment, something changed in John. He could see the fear in his soldiers' eyes, but he could also see something else. Resolve. The humans weren't going to let this Deathworld claim them. They weren't going to let the enemy destroy everything they had fought for. With a battle cry, John charged forward, leading the charge into the heart of the alien forces. His team followed, pushing through the fear and uncertainty. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their future, and they would not back down. The fate of the humans on the Deathworld had been decided. The battle was fierce, but humanity would not be defeated. The ultimate test had come, and the humans were ready to face whatever the Deathworld and the galaxy had in store for them.